We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Did you watch the Oscars at all? That was last night. We're recording on a Monday night for once this week, so Oscars were last night. See any of it?
I knew that they were coming because Google kept talking about it, but I did not realize it was last night, nor did I care.
I didn't watch them either. I just figured I'd hear the results later. I didn't super care
Black
about
Panther won some stuff, but it wasn't like the best picture thing, right?
No, it wasn't best picture. It wasn't any acting awards. It got best soundtrack though, best score.
Oh, score, is that the same as a soundtrack? I mean, is there a difference?
Best score. It was best score. So
because score is like the music behind, but the soundtrack is something different.
Right? Yeah. I don't think they give a soundtrack award in the Oscars.
Because people
they give best song, which Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga won to no one's surprise. If that didn't win, what would? So
I don't know. I've never heard that song.
Star is Born. It's a good song. I like that song.
I have no idea.
And apparently the performance was very good, so maybe I'll check that out. I'm sure it'll be on YouTube somewhere. And everyone was like, "Hey, no host, but it zipped along at a good clip," and so good. that was all right.
Just get a robot to do it next year.
Pretty much. Well, apparently,
until a robot sexually abuses somebody, and in which case we're back at square one.
Apparently, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Maya Rudolph were almost like de facto hosts without actually being hosts, like they did the intro and stuff. So there you go. Whatever. Yeah. Good on them.
Well, I'm glad that whatever happened. Whatever.
I hope you, dear listener, were happy with the results.
I just kicked my camera. Sorry.
All right.
All right. It's going to be one of those podcasts. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. YouTube.com/avrant. We shouldn't even mention that. I mean, we should mention it so people know it exists, but not to contact us.
You can watch us on video on youtube.com/avrant, so that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think we're probably about couple of months away from YouTube just disabling comments. Because I follow some of the drama that goes along with the content creators, because I mean technically we're content creators, but I mean
not of any significance in terms of views. Yes.
No, we're not real. We don't exist. But people are getting their videos demonetized because of things that are said in comments.
Right, yes. Yeah.
And that's because, there's hate speech in the comments, therefore Nestle doesn't want to be a part of whatever it is, or Apple.
As a creator, you can turn the comment section off, which doesn't
but a lot of times that reduces views.
I guess so.
That sense of community that people have. And, unfortunately, there's a couple of bad actors that's making everything. But I think we're not that far away from comments being completely gone, in which case, just go to YouTube and view us. If you want to contact Rob directly, it's rob@avrants.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. You should get an AVRant Twitter. avrant_Rob.
Now I should.
Now. You made it, Rob. I think you're going to stay. I think we're going to keep you around for a bit.
I think I finally crossed having more followers than people I follow. So, yeah.
Oh, that would be hard. That would be hard for me. If anybody followed me, it'd be more people than I follow. I don't follow anybody, I don't think. I did for a little bit. I might, whatever. I don't know. I haven't opened Twitter voluntarily in quite some time. I will say that my son, just before, like minutes before this podcast was supposed to, came in and said, what's my password for Google? I'm like, I don't know. I made his account a long time ago. He's
forgot password. That'll be your
friend. He's going to be 13 in a month, less than a month, a couple of weeks. And so he decided he wanted to do one of the fitness, the Google Fit thing. So it asked for his birthday, put his birthday in. He's not old enough to have Google. I lied when I made this account. So they locked him out and they're going to delete his account. I'm like, dude, why?
Yeah.
Why did you decide? So I'm a little bit on the frustrated side, I'm going to just say, because, I was just sitting down to relax a little bit with my wife, and he comes in and then makes all this drama, and now I'm irritated. So I'm going to be extra angry today.
Okay.
I know. It's going to be hard to
AVRant,
differentiate
well
me
titled.
extra angry from me normally angry, but I am definitely not in a good place. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become the listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way. If you want to support it financially, one of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com/AVRantPodcast, I think, which Patreon is a service that will allow you to take and monthly give to whatever content creators you would like, and we can be one of them. So we want to thank our 84 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yeah, that's 84 patrons that we're up to there. Patreon.com/AVRantPodcast. You can think of it like a voluntary subscription. If you want to do a one-time donation and or you don't want to use Patreon, come to the website avrant.com. Over on the right-hand side, it says support AVRant, and that'll take you to PayPal, where you can use, of course, a PayPal account if you have one, or just a credit card. You don't have to sign up for PayPal to do that one, so that'll work too.
If you can't support the podcast financially, or you choose not to and would like to support it in some other way, or you do support it in some other way, just let us know what it is so that we can mention you. So Infinite Gary took a suggestion from Rob via an email to give the newest Philharmonic BMR3. It's BMR. Is it just BMR?
Yeah, it's the Philharmonic Philharmonitor. I didn't put that in because there was no way you were going to say that. But it's the Philharmonitor BMR. Yes, it's the new version of it.
I don't even like the name Philharmonic, I have to be honest with you.
Well, Philharmonic is fine. I mean, like...
I know, but I feel like the guy's name is Phil. Is the guy's name Phil?
No, it's Dennis Murphy. Very well-known crossover designer. It's his...
Yeah, well, I knew that, but I thought maybe the owner or whatever...
No,
I thought
he just chose Philharmonic Audio as the name, but yes.
Okay, then I like it. I like it fine now. Yeah, I just assumed it was some dude named Phil. And I was like, that's really annoying, but that's fine now. But Philharmonitor is stupid. The three-way speaker, anyways, Infinite Gary got the three-way speaker. And Gary wrote
not yet.
Oh, he ordered it.
He's trying to. That's the whole thing.
Gary wrote to Dennis Murphy to let him know it was our suggestion, or Rob's specifically, but from our podcast, and to also inquire about the availability, since their website warns that they aren't taking any new orders at the moment. So maybe he'll be getting something else, probably more expensive, because that's what Gary does.
Who knows? But yeah, he was looking for something a little off the beaten path. I'm like, well, I know he gave Ascend's Horizon center speaker a try, but that was as a center speaker paired with other speakers that didn't totally match it. So not totally surprising that wasn't entirely to his taste. I'm like, yeah, give this a try, because it's, it's got a sort of specialized mid-range driver paired with a Rowell Ribbon tweeter. So, and he just wants a pair of speakers. So something a little different to try.
So it looks like we're gonna have a giveaway. Apparently.
Yeah, hopefully.
James, one of our listeners, has a Philips Hue 2-bulb starter kit. So the Philips Hue is that backlighting stuff, right?
No, that would be Ambilight.
The Ambilight. Okay.
So no, this is Philips Hue, which is their like automation lighting, which like works with everything. It works with Apple's HomeKit, it works with Insteon, it works with Harmony Hubs, it works with She Who Shall Be Not Be Named from Amazon, it works with Google Assistant, works with absolutely everything. So if you want to control your lights by remote, via voice, through your network, dim them, all that stuff, this is one way that you can do that. So it's a white bulb starter kit, 2 bulbs. They're like 60 watt equivalent if we're equating how much light they output compared to incandescent bulbs. It is a soft white, so it's like that, that reddish white that we're used to from an incandescent bulb. These are not the white tunable, because they have a version where you can tune the color of white, and they're not the color changing bulbs, because they also have those that you can turn into a disco light. These are just soft white bulbs, but they're dimmable without you having a dimmer switch, because they're controlled via your network.
Okay. So he'd like to give it to someone who donates $5 or more to AVRant. You have until March 11th, I guess.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now.
Okay. We'll randomly select the name of someone who has donated $5 or more between now and March 11th and put you in touch with James so that he can ship the Philips Hue starter kit to you. James says he'll cover any shipping cost. Oh, you people in Australia.
I don't know about that. He didn't specify. I'm putting his words more or less here, so I assume he's talking North America.
Okay.
Do those? Bulbs aren't wildly different all over the world, are they? The socket? It's not like electrical wall sockets. Everybody uses the same bulb twist-in thingy, don't they? I don't know if that's true. These will fit in a regular North American light bulb socket. I know that much.
I'm trying to remember from Australia. I know I changed light bulbs.
Yeah.
They must have been the same.
They must.
I don't remember.
Because I know wall sockets. Those are definitely different.
Those are way different.
Yeah. But then I'm thinking, is it
they have different electricity?
Is it 220 volts some places? Which it probably isn't meant to work with that.
It's 50 hertz in Australia for sure.
Yeah, the hertz as well. Yeah. These are North American bulbs.
So
if North American bulbs will work for you, then we'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's put it this way. Okay, this is what's going to happen, because this is already getting too complex. But if you donate to $5 or more via PayPal, and in the comments, because you can leave a comment, let us know that you want to be entered.
Yes.
Then we will put you in the drawing for this.
Very good.
Now, if James says if we receive $200 or more in total donations over these 2 weeks, he'll throw in an Echo Dot, a Generation 2 Echo Dot, as well. Now,
there you go.
If you're in for the bulbs, you're in for the dot.
That's right.
Okay, but the $200, I'm not going to worry. If you just want to donate during that time and don't want to be considered because you don't have the right power or whatever it is, or you just are available for one and not the other or whatever, just it's fine. The $200 total, regardless if somebody puts a comment in there.
These were James's rules, so I'm just throwing them out there the way he said.
Yeah, it's getting a little complicated. Whatever. That's how we'll do it.
He
whatever.
wants to get us some money. That's what he's aiming to do, and he's willing to give away a Philips Hue Star kit to do it, and possibly an Echo Dot.
It would have been nice if we could have done like the first 2 weeks of March instead of doing it from right now until 2 weeks from now. Because some people take a week or two to listen. I mean, it's a 2-hour long podcast.
It is.
All right. In the news, Joel, Greg, me, Mike, just about everybody noticed the coverage of the latest Alpha Xbox One update, which had a Dolby Surround Upmixing. Previously, if you set your Xbox One to bitstream audio with Dolby Atmos as the bitstream format, your AV receiver will always remain in Atmos mode. Not true. It's now always in 7.1 audio, at least for me.
There definitely was a time when that was the case, though. Yeah.
But you wouldn't get any sound coming out of your overhead speakers and a lot of your other speakers unless the content was actually being given to it in Atmos. And you can apply your receiver's upmixing because it was already thought it was getting an Atmos signal from the Xbox One. None of that will actually change with this update, except now the Xbox One is going to be applying Dolby Surround Upmixing itself before sending the signal to your AV receiver. At that moment, the upmixing is always on by default. At the moment, at least, the upmixing is always on by default. But Microsoft said that will be an option you can toggle on and off when it's ready for the full public release, which will mean that it'll still always say Atmos, but then you will not always get it in Atmos. That being said, their explanation for why it is that it always says Atmos is because they didn't want your receiver to have to change modes,
right? And
that would create audio delays or some clicking or something like that.
Okay,
to which I call shenanigans, sir. Shenanigans.
Yeah, I don't totally buy that.
That's just the worst BS of excuse I can. Like, okay, your receiver is 20 years old. Sure. Okay. maybe it'll be a delay as it switches from one to the other. It's not a JVC projector, which is got 30 seconds between input changes. No. These receivers do these things almost instantaneously. Yeah. And even if they didn't, who cares?
No, before it was because everything, whatever the source coming in was being decoded into uncompressed PCM inside the Xbox. That way they could mix in their dashboard sounds.
Right.
And then they could just output that as uncompressed PCM, or they could, inside the Xbox, put all of it into a Dolby Digital container or a DTS container or now an Atmos container. That's what was really going on. It was so that you could decode whatever was coming in, mix it with their own sounds, and then put it all in a container. And pretty sure that's what's still happening. But you know what? Now the Atmos container will include, if you want, Dolby Surround Upmixing. So now it's exactly the same as if you were applying the Dolby Surround Upmixer in your AV receiver. It'll just be being done inside the player itself. And they did note this is not a Microsoft thing. This is a Dolby thing. So
Dolby's
hopefully
doing it.
It'll be done correctly.
Well, they can't screw it up any more than already it has been. So, at this point, aside from having the front speakers play out of the back, that's quite possibly the only thing they could do that's more wrong than they've already done. So, I would love it if this was the case and this thing was finally fixed. It'll be just in time for Xbox Scarlet to come out, and then they can screw that one up.
The center speaker is now in your top rears. Enjoy.
Enjoy. The voices are equally mixed into the side surrounds. So it just sounds like it's coming from kind of behind you and inside your head. In the comments, Matthew heard Gabriel asking us about $500 projectors and mentioning that he's fine with buying a refurbished unit. So Matthew, forward the links to BenQ's direct online refurbished outlet store. I think we knew about that one, but I had forgotten about it.
I didn't know about BenQ Direct, because that's all it's called, is BenQ Direct. So that's good to know about. Yep.
And there's also Epson's clearance setter. He also noted that the BenQ HT2050A that we recommend is available refurbished for $525. That's got to be close enough. I mean, come on, man.
That's what we're hoping. So $700 is about what it normally goes for, so that's a pretty good savings.
And he says, though, you always want to contact the outlet stores to ask about the included lamp. That's always a good thing.
I mean, if it's got some hours on it, this is not the end of the world. You're going to put some hours on it anyway. I'd say anything below 100 hours, I'd probably be fine with. You know? Doesn't have to be brand spanking new, but you don't want something with like 2,000 hours on it. That's no good.
I have no idea how many hours are on my lamp. I probably should check that. All right, get to the questions here. Billy has a very small room, 9 feet 3
9 3/4 feet, almost 10 feet.
Okay,
but not
why
quite.
Are we writing it like this?
I've always written it like this lately.
No, this is the first time I've seen fractions. No, you got to put the 0.75.
What do you mean this is the first time you see fractions?
I'm thinking it's like 3/4 inches. I mean, I don't know what this thing is. No, this is the first time I've ever seen this like
You complain when I put 9.75 as feet.
I would never complain about that.
You want me to just write it out long form? 9 3/4 in letters feet? Hyphens?
Don't ever say 9 3/4 because what does that even mean? That's 9 in.
Okay, I'll put just under 10 feet next time. Will that be all right?
In 8 inches, right? So it's 8 inches. 9 and 8 inches. No, 9 inches. Whatever.
Yeah, but
all right. So Billy has a very small room. It's just under 10 feet, just over 12.5 feet, and he's got a 120-inch 2.35:1 acoustically transparent Seymour AV screen that is wall-to-wall and 3 in-wall Klipsch speakers because he was afraid he wasn't going to hear things behind it. The 3 recliner seats are very close to the side wall, so he put the surround speakers, also Klipsch in walls, in the back wall. And he's got 4 in-ceiling speakers and 2 subs, one in the front left corner, one in the back right corner, all Klipsch. So he's got 5 acoustic panels on hand, 4 feet by 2 feet and 2 inches thick. Where should you place them? First reflection points.
Points on the side walls and on the wall behind you.
Yeah, that's where I would put them.
Yeah. Now, he does have a door, which I'm assuming goes to an equipment room because he's got his projector in kind of a cubby hole back there. So I'm guessing that goes to kind of a projector / equipment room, that door. So I don't know. I mean, that door looks narrow.
It does look very, very narrow. That's definitely narrow. A closet of some sort.
So I'm not sure about like literally mounting a 2-foot by 4-foot panel onto that door. So you might only be able to put one panel smack dab in the middle behind what I am sure is your prime seat, the one right in the middle.
Is there only 3 seats?
There are only 3 seats. Yeah, remember this is less than 10 feet wide. I'm not even sure how he gets around this. He must have a narrow walkway. He probably has to turn sideways to get.
Well, it looks like on the right side there's something. I mean, you can see that you can see carpet on the right side of the couch from the picture from behind.
But
the room is gray. The front wall looks like it's black or dark gray. There's the couches are black. It's very nice. Set up the doors.
Oh yeah, I like this, and that wall-to-wall screen looks cool when your room is this narrow.
It does. It's very cool.
But yeah,
putting my water down.
At least one panel on the wall behind you. If there is some way you could maybe put one on the door there, but it's looking like that'd be a trick. So at least one on the panel on the back wall behind you there, and then I'd put 2 on each side wall at what would essentially be your first reflection points on the side walls.
Wherever that would be in relation to where your speakers are. I'm gonna be honest with you. I would not have put the speakers in the back wall. I know why he did it.
Sure,
but I think that they would have been better on the side walls than the back wall. The back, I think that it would have been fine. Your concern is that they're going to be blowing right in somebody's ears.
Yes, which, given the placement of the actual entrance door, they would be basically right beside that left seat, the left surround speaker.
Yes, it looks like there might be a little space behind there, but we don't know exactly what's in that wall behind there, so that might be true. But think of it this way. Billy, is that who I'm talking to here? It doesn't matter how close the speaker is physically to the person who is there. The volume is measured from the prime seat.
Yes,
that's your volume. So if you put it 100 feet behind you or 2 feet behind you, the volume at your front seat is going to be the same, which means the volume for the person next to you is also going to be the same as they would have experienced if it was 100 feet away. You know, I mean, not technically.
Not
now,
quite
direction,
because of distance, inverse square law and all that, but yeah,
but
more or less.
You know, more or less. So this idea that if the speaker is super duper close, you don't want it to be blowing right in your ear is a concern. Well, it shouldn't be technically, at least not as much. But that being said, and how come we're seemingly never recommending Klipsch speakers? It's the same reason we very rarely recommend many big box brands, and it's because most of the people who are asking about speakers are looking for budget recommendations. They are,
or at least maximum value, bang for your buck. Yeah.
Right. They say, I have this much money to spend, and I would like to get as much speaker as I can for it.
Sure.
And we're like, okay, well, these are the speakers we would recommend because they are the best bang for the buck. And while Klipsch makes very good speakers, and I've got no problems with Klipsch speakers, and I have reviewed favorably Klipsch speakers in the past, they are not what I would call a bang for your buck brand.
Although they're certainly not a bad value at all. They're very reasonable for a retail brand of speakers, absolutely.
I think as you get higher, especially as you get higher up in price with Klipsch, you start to see them sort of level off with some of the other offerings that are out there. But yes, they're a perfectly reasonable brand. If you have limited access to speakers or are uncomfortable buying online, and you came to me and you said you have Klipsch speakers, I'd be like, those are great.
Yep. And occasionally when someone is going for maximum efficiency at a reasonable price, we have recommended Klipsch because that is exactly what you want in that scenario.
Right. And we have talked about them and other horn-loaded options, and there's nothing wrong with them. So.
Yep. But I think it's because, like, the HT guys, they're very gung-ho about Klipsch, and we're less so. But, you know, we have our preferences as well. So
that's
yeah.
Infinite Gary with ATSC 3.0 for broadcast television on the way. One of the promised upgrades is immersive audio. While it's easy to understand the upgrade that immersive audio offers when it comes to movies and TV shows, it seems like it would be a lot more complicated when it comes to live broadcasts. Gary points to an article in which a sound mixer discusses how there aren't any best practices or standards yet when it comes to live immersive audio. 3D audio panning equivalent for live signals has only become available very recently, and then there are the questions about what types of microphones to use, how many and where they should be positioned, plus how does the sound mixer listen to immersive audio on a location in a truck or van, and then since most consumers are at best going to be using the Atmos soundbar, I wouldn't call that best, but whatever, who monitors the final mix and ultimately decides what gets broadcast over the air. It's noted that broadcasters, NBC in particular, apparently, are currently experimenting and have claimed that some of their tests turned out better than expected, using beam forming mics, shrunken down audio monitors that fit the production trucks, and having a master control office with a variety of playback systems, including soundbars, in actual rooms advising the on-site trucks in real time.
That's quite the setup to get all this going.
That seems wasteful, but
seems
whatever.
Like a lot more than what we're doing right now, but there it is.
So all that sounds promising, but Gary wants to know if we think it'll actually be worth it. We have live 5.1 broadcast right now. And if we just upmix it using Dolby Surround, the upmixer, it already seems to work quite well. On top of that, he often hears sounds being picked up by the current microphones in 5.1 mix that he'd rather not hear. Vendors yelling during an MLB game. Who watches MLB?
He does. He watches baseball.
You know why you can hear those people yelling? Because nothing's going on. It's boring. There's nothing to cheer about because there's 2 people playing a game. Well, 3 people playing a game.
Bada.
3 people playing a game and like 9 other people watching them play that game and hoping they get involved at some point.
Or not.
I am very sorry for you people who love baseball. I want to say I have nothing against you.
I still don't understand how they can afford to pay the players as much as they do because who's watching? But
hey, people watch it. I have a problem with it being dubbed America's pastime. Because it is not.
Well,
it may have been at one time. Yes, it was, for sure. It is definitely not anymore. I'm sorry, it's not. You know, you don't see a bunch of pickup games. Maybe I'm in the wrong place, but the Yankees, you know, spring training is down here. So we is it the Yankees? I think so. It doesn't matter. You know, there's tons of baseball. I live in an area where it's like competitive baseball people live here. Their kids are like on travel teams. They're gone, like they go to practice like 5 nights a week, and then they're gone all weekend, you know, at tournaments and stuff like that. These people are hardcore. You know how many parents I see playing baseball? Goose egg. There's a league that plays at the one.
I shouldn't have mentioned MLB. We're not going to get to any questions.
I can't. I'm sorry. I have a problem with it. I'm an American, and I get to vote on what the pastime is. I will take football. I will even take basketball, even though I don't really like basketball that much. I'd take soccer over this because a lot more people play soccer. I think ultimate frisbee, but let's just go on. All right. Anyways, vendors generally do an MLB game, certain crowd noise, etc. So, do we actually want even more microphones, and do we want mixers putting sounds in 11 or 22 speakers? Is live immersive audio something we should actually want and look forward to as viewers? I think it makes a not bad point here, and that is this idea of where the microphones are going to be. Like, if it were me, and I know this is probably overly simplistic because I do not have the knowledge and experience necessary to make these sorts of things. But as a lay person, it seems to me that what you should have is a number of microphones set around the field in some configuration, whatever that might be. I don't really think it matters that it's Atmos or whatever. I think that those height channels and stuff. I mean, everything's happening on a plane for the most part, unless the camera is like inside the actual action, which it never is. It's always on the outside. So what you should be hearing is essentially each camera should have a way of being positioned so that you can tell the direction it's facing, and then the microphones stay the same. And then as the camera changes position, then the which microphone is being used as front or sides or whatever changes based on that position. The front should be the action, and the back should be essentially general crowd noise, but nothing more. Yeah, I mean, but that's the way that it seems in my mind that it would work best. But then again, like I said, I am not an expert in these things.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mean, they're going to be experimenting during the Olympics. They're going to be using NHK's 22 channel-based system. And I think that's going to inform a lot of this because that's at the Olympics where there are going to be some closed venues, so they can actually, set this up in a scenario where they're not going to have to be moving it all the time.
Well, you can't control what the audience says.
Right.
You can't control this stuff.
Well, hey, I mean, listen to hockey in Canada. There's you hear all the words.
So right. And that's in America, that's not going to fly.
That's right.
I mean, that's not going to go because people are, advertisers will be like, I'm pulling out.
That's right. Somebody's going to complain. But my honest prediction in this is that I think Gary is onto something here. I think we're probably going to see sound maybe not broadcast live in Atmos very often, maybe for certain special events, maybe for something like an award show, Right. But I think we're probably going to see, because of cost and because of just complexity, I think we might continue with just stereo and 5.1 because, we can upmix it at home. So,
yeah. Well, okay. Clint used to work on, I think it was Clint who's talking to me about this, on like the X Games and that sort of thing. And everything was delayed by a little bit. It was not like hours or, many minutes. It was just a couple of minutes. It was just long enough where the sound mixer could sit there and put a couple of sweeteners in there to make the hits sound a little bit better.
And a lot of live broadcasts have that, so that if there is bad language, they can bleep it out or whatever. So short delay.
Yeah. All right, so when there was Dolby Cinema or IMAX Laser HDR release, do the movie studios have to grade the film twice? Once for the SDR theaters and a second time for the relatively small number of HDR theaters. Grade it twice? What does that mean?
Like color grading it,
Oh. I mean, I guess you have to, right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and actually, over at Flat Panels HD, they linked to a really informative video. It was with the guy who actually did the very first HDR TV show, which was Netflix's Marco Polo.
Okay.
So it was the guy who did the HDR and SDR color grading for that, and he gives a very informative tutorial on the sort of the whole process of color grading, and he points out that for television, they will grade in preferably Dolby Vision because Dolby Vision has things right in there that were developed by Dolby to quite easily translate the Dolby Vision HDR into SDR. and it does it really quite well. And he even pointed out, he's like, HDR 10 Plus doesn't do that. If we're going to use HDR 10 Plus, we have to make it in HDR 10 Plus, and then we have to make it again in SDR. You can't convert one to the other, at least not easily right now. So he made a point of that. But he was saying for cinemas, and this was during the question and answer period after he gave the tutorial, he was saying basically they grade for the regular theaters, and then if it's going to be a Dolby Vision HDR release, because that's the only HDR we have in theaters right now is the Dolby Vision version of it, they go to an entire dedicated dubbing stage, which is set up just like a Dolby Cinema, and you do a full color grading there for Dolby Vision. So it's two completely separate grading times that they go through, and it's a specialized process. Expensive.
Yeah, it's very hot in here. All right, Gary has a 7.1.4 Atmos setup using a Marantz receiver and Revell speakers. He ran Audyssey, and for a 7.1 configuration, that's fine, but sometimes he likes to take his surround back speakers, which are on stands, and move them to a different location so that they're set up as a stereo pair for his favorite reading chair. Mm-hmm. So that involves moving the speakers and swapping some speaker wires. He then sets the listening mode to stereo. What he'd like to know is the Audyssey correction for the 7.1.4 configuration still being applied when he does this. Obviously, it wouldn't be correct. Different left and right speakers now, and completely different placement. But there's no super easy way to switch between the two different Audyssey measurements, and you have to go through the whole save and load process using the Audyssey Editor app. He's fine with Audyssey just being off when he does this. So is there any easy way to ensure that that happens without having to dig into the settings and manually turn Audyssey off and then back on when he goes to his 7.1.4 setup? I mean, just use pure direct.
There's that.
I mean, that's what I would do. I would just go into pure direct mode, and it shuts off all correction, and you get full range to those two speakers, and you're sitting 2.5 inches away from them.
Although I'm not sure he might still be using his subwoofer.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then you're kind of hosed on that one. But there's a 2-channel stereo mode that you can set up, and Marantz and Denon's that have different settings than the Audyssey, and then you can turn Audyssey off there, I think.
Well, so that's a little interesting too. I was going to point to that. They do have a separate 2-channel only section, which is what gets applied when you switch to stereo listening mode, or direct. Not pure direct, but direct. So direct or stereo, these will apply. But that is only for setting alternate size between large or small, or an alternate crossover point, or alternate trim levels, or alternate distances. You can set all of those things, the speaker settings, but it doesn't change the Audyssey setting.
I thought Audyssey, there's an Audyssey on-off option in your Harmony remote, I feel like.
Well, there is, manually just turning it off, and perhaps you set that up on a Harmony remote so that it's an easy single button press. But even more than that, there is a thing on Denon and Marantz remotes called Smart Select, which when you set up one of these, it's like basically 4 little memories, gives you numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on the remote, and when you set that up, when you press the button, it'll automatically choose an input on the AV receiver, which I don't think is a problem because he's probably listening to whatever stereo source, and it allows you to set whether Audyssey is on or off, or if Audyssey is on, which version, like which target curve it's using. And it allows you to choose a default volume and things like that. So with a combination of depending on whether you're using subwoofers or not, whether you're setting alternate crossover points or not, whatever, that can all be done in that separate 2-channel only mode within the speaker setup menu, and that'll always be applied whenever you switch to stereo mode, and then you can use the Smart Select to make sure that it's doing Audyssey or not, as you please. So that should work, that combination of those two things.
Alvin on Twitter. Alvin experimented a little bit, and for 2-channel music listening, he found he liked the way things sounded when he switched his Audyssey settings to bypass left-right. Music seemed to sound a little brighter this way, and although he still preferred the default Audyssey curve for surround sound. But then he got new speakers, which meant he reran Audyssey. Now he's quite happy with how things sound using default Audyssey curve, whether it's surround or 2-channel. He was amazed at how different the EQ graphs were for each speaker. So what was the intended purpose of bypass left-right setting? Is it wrong to use it? I mean, yeah, it's wrong to use it.
They did take it away at one point, and then I believe they brought it back.
They brought it back. So doesn't it, the bypass left right just absolutely doesn't do anything to the left and right speaker? Isn't that what it does?
Yes, and in fact, at least in the old version, it then used the measurement of your front left right as the target curve for all your other speakers, although I don't think that's how it's applied anymore in the current bypass left right setting. Which is, as you say, I believe it just leaves your left-right speakers alone, hence bypass left-right. Now, I mean, this was to appease certain two-channel only fans who are like, I do use my system for both two-channel only music and for movies, and when I listen to two-channel only, I don't want subwoofers on, I don't want any correction on, so just bypass my front left rights. And then because I spent so much time setting up my front left speakers and getting them to sound just the way I want when it's surround sound time and I turn Audyssey on, don't touch my front left right speakers, just leave them alone. In fact, make all my other speakers sound like that, or these days just leave them alone. So it was to appease that. However, you're definitely not getting linear sound. Which, fine, you have a preference, this is the way you've set it up, that's okay. You can now, in the Audyssey Editor app, choose whatever target curve you want. You can see the measurement before correction, you can see what that measurement is, and then you can say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to manually make that my target curve in the Audyssey Editor app. You can still do that if that's what you want to do. But yeah, that's why that setting existed. We're not fans of using it. It's not, I mean, nothing is right or wrong in audio. You can do what you want, but
right. I mean, yeah.
It wouldn't be our recommendation to go that way.
We've seen people turn speakers upside down because they wanted the tweeter to be lower.
Yeah.
So I mean, it happens.
That's okay.
JayDee, which is different than JZ, is looking to expand to Atmos with the purchase of a B stock Denon X4500H from Gibby's. That's a Canadian accessories for less. The front left, right, and center speakers are ELACs. The surround and surround back speakers are in-wall Micca speakers, and 2 Energy subs handle the bass, although the plan is to eventually replace them with SVS. 2 Aura bass shakers in the couch also add more tactile shaking if desired. Gibby's has some Polk MC80 in-ceiling speakers available for a fairly low price, $160 a pair Canadian. They're 8-inch woofers with 3/4-inch silk dome tweeters that can be aimed. Do we have any opinion about those? Something we recommend more highly without increasing the price a whole lot. Those would be just fine. I don't know that
Atmos speakers, they'll be fine. In fact, one thing I have always liked about Polk speakers, even though we often don't recommend them or talk about them in the grandest terms, the one thing I really do like about them is they always have really even wide dispersion.
Yeah, which works really great for Atmos.
Which works really well for Atmos, yeah.
Now, don't be tempted to point that tweeter at you, though.
Right. There is no need to do that in your Atmos speakers.
Atmos speakers are supposed to be firing straight down. That is what you are supposed to be sitting off axis from them, so don't worry
aiming
about
the tweeter when you cannot also aim the woofer, that creates all kinds of weird intermodulation distortion issues. So I'm not a fan of even being able to do that, but people want it, so they put it in there. There's really no need for an 8-inch woofer for your Atmos speakers.
6-inch should be fine.
Oh, the 6.5-inch version is fine, which Gibby's also sells for $140 a pair. So why not save $20 a pair and go with the 6.5-inch version? That is sort of your least expensive option, other than you can get Monoprice's in-ceiling speakers through primecables.ca in Canada. However, they only carry the Caliber series, which is the very, very entry-level series that I'm not a huge fan of. And when you look at the Canadian price of $97 for a pair, they're like $30 a pair in the States, which even with the exchange rate and shipping, I'm like, that's not a great deal. And I'm not a huge fan of the Caliber series speakers. I like the Alpha series from Monoprice, but not huge of the Caliber, and those are the only ones that Prime Cables carries. So I think the $140 from Gibby's for those Polks for Atmos speakers for the 6.5-inch version is totally fine. If you want Micca speakers, in-ceiling Micca speakers, to match your already in-wall Micca surrounds and surround backs, you can get those from Amazon.ca for $160 a pair. So that's the same price as you were going to pay for the Polks, except these would be 6.5-inch Miccas. Which, again, if you look at the American pricing, is a horrible deal based on Canadian exchange rate. But yeah, we're kind of boned that way in Canada. Our in-wall and in-ceiling options are somewhat limited. So, yeah, there you go.
Lastly, he asks, any chance we could avoid dropping our voices into a sort of under-your-breath whisper from time to time? That sounds like me. Or apply more dynamic range compression. When listening in a car, our voices sometimes become impossible to hear. It's not often, and the podcast is otherwise sublime, but it's like missing a line of dialogue in the movie. What did he just say? Dude, I compressed the crap out of this thing. I'm going to be honest with you. It would be very, very difficult for me to compress it any more than I already compress it. Yeah. It is... And I appreciate what you're saying. I do two things to both of our tracks, and I think Rob does some stuff to his already before he sends it.
I just denoise mine is all I do. Yeah.
So I normalize it, which sort of shaves off the peaks and gets everything in sort of a more even shape, and then I compress it after that. And I don't do it for the entire podcast. I do it for each of us individually.
Okay.
And then Rob, I usually, because of the timbre of his voice is a little bit different than mine, I end up having to turn him down a couple of dB almost every single time. Not always, but almost every single time. So I can try to avoid that, but I'm not gonna.
It's the hand beside your mouth.
I'm sorry.
I whisper.
Can't. Yes. I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. I guess that's all I'm gonna say.
You're no Nilay Patel. I love Nilay Patel on the Verge podcast, but man, oh man, does he ever drop his voice on a lot of things. The ends of every single one of his sentences just trail off.
Who's what podcast? What is this? Nilay Patel? Who's that?
He's sort of the head guy over at the Verge right now.
Oh, I don't know this. See, I just did it again.
That's right. Mutter.
You don't need to know what that was. Go on with the podcast. Moani on Twitter. Moani has a JVC projector that's compatible with HDR, but the way Ultra HD Blu-rays look when played back onto standard Ultra HD Blu-ray player is hit or miss. Some look great, others look too dark. So he's been itching to get the Panasonic UB820 for its HDR Optimizer, but is it actually worth it? Will Ultra HD Blu-rays look way better, or as he's hoping? I don't think that's what the HDR Optimizer does.
Well,
am I wrong on that? Because I thought the whole idea was that we're optimizing SDR for HDR projectors, vice versa.
In the case of Panasonic's UB820, and actually this applies to the 420 as well, which never came out in North America, but hopefully the UB450 that they announced at CES will, because I'd love to see this capability brought to a lower price point than $500, which is what the UB820 goes for. But the HDR Optimizer, basically you pick what you want your maximum nit level to be.
Yeah.
And I believe the lowest available option is 500 nits, which is still brighter than your projector is ever going to be. But basically what it does is it says, okay, now the maximum light out level, regardless of the content, regardless of what's on the disc, it's always going to be this 500 nits or 1,000 nits or 1,500 nits or whatever. And so it sort of re-tone maps everything. So the display still gets HDR metadata, but the metadata it gets is always the same because the player has decided what that maximum light level is going to be, and it is then remapping every disc that it plays to that maximum light level. The issue, though, is that the Panasonic relies on the metadata that's on the disc, and very often we're seeing that metadata has been zeroed out or is wrong.
Well, and that's, fortunately, when we're at this early stage of this new technology, which Ultra HDs are still new. It's going to be new for another year or so. But mastering is going to be an issue.
Yeah.
And we're going to run into this. We've run into it already. I mean, even Dolby Atmos, the Thor Ragnarok soundtrack, where you're like, what happened to the bass?
Yeah.
There's no bass in this
and the
thing.
dynamic range.
It's atrocious. It's so bad. I just kept turning it up and turning it up and turning it up. I'm like, I never do that. I usually am the one who's like, people are talking, let's jack it up, and I'll immediately turn it back down once the action started. Not this one. So mastering is at this point is going to be the issue. So if you're noticing, really heavy differences between discs, I would be more inclined at this level to be. Because it's between discs. If you said all of my discs look too dark, I don't know what I'm doing. I need a new Blu-ray player. Then I would say, okay, well let's check the settings in your projector. Let's talk about some other things. But this I would point towards the mastering before I would worry about your player.
Well, it certainly is, but you still want the ability to have these discs look good. You just, it's a movie you want to see. You want it to look good. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to adjust something to make that happen. So I want to say on the Panasonic with the HDR Optimizer, you do have the ability inside of those players to move some sliders manually. They have a slider for the low parts of the dark, dim parts of the image, a slider for the bright parts of the image, and an overall slider for the whole thing. So you can manually adjust, but you'd literally be doing that disc by disc yourself.
I was going to say, you better get some Post-it notes and write down what you set the sliders at, and then every time you play the disc, that's
the idea behind it is lovely, but because they're relying on the metadata on the disc, it doesn't always work. For the discs that have proper metadata, it works swimmingly well.
Right.
But for the discs that don't, when there's some really popular discs that, like Black Panther, has zeroed out metadata on it. Wonderful. So it's not going to work automatically for that. So for a JVC projector, I think the better solution is to actually convert the HDR to SDR. Because you're only ever going to get 100 nits out of HDR anyway. So if you convert the HDR to SDR really well so that you retain all the detail in the HDR, and hopefully retain the wide color as well, although that's not super important. It's not that big of a difference. So there's two ways to come at it. One, you could still end up getting the Panasonic UB820 because it's about the only player you can still get now, because the Oppos aren't being sold anymore, that can do HDR to SDR conversion while retaining the Rec 2020 color. There aren't many others that do that. The alternative would be to get Sony's X800 or the upcoming X800 M2, because that does a very good job of converting HDR to SDR with the ability to move the overall light level if the SDR conversion comes out looking too dark or too blown out. You can move the overall light level, which most other players don't let you do. They just do HDR to SDR conversion and you have no manual control over the end result. But the X800 isn't retaining the Rec 2020 color. It's converting that down to 709. So is the wide color super worth paying more than twice the price for to you? Or could you get away with just, HDR to SDR and everything looks great now?
Right.
So, yeah, one of those two.
All right, Dave on Twitter. Dave says he's finally ready to start backing up his Blu-ray discs. He's already set up a Windows 7 enterprise computer as a Plex server, and he has an NVIDIA Shield plugged into his home theater. So what software does he need to make the backups themselves?
All you need is Make MKV. It's so simple these days. We should have to put a disclaimer, because, I mean, it's not technically illegal, right? Is it? Well, in Canada, having the end result is legal. You are allowed to have a backup of a disc that you own, but the process of getting there is illegal.
Well, so this is my thing. Okay, as a podcast, I think we need to have a disclaimer here. Morally, I think that I have very little qualms about you making copies of your discs so that you have backups.
Yeah.
I wish that I had copies of some of my discs because they have been ruined by or lost over the years. So I wish I had copies. I do not have copies. I do not make copies. So, piracy is not a victimless crime, as they tell you at the beginning of every stupid movie these days. But so don't pirate.
At least movies that haven't been pirated, because that's the first thing that gets removed on the pirated version. So only the legal people ever see those warnings.
So don't sell them or give them away or upload them someplace. No. Just use them for yourself.
But if you want to basically make your own Kaleidoscape, which is what a lot of us want to do, Make MKV is the only software that you need. It does the decryption. It does the backing up. Of course, you end up with an MKV file, as the name suggests, but Plex will play that back perfectly well. I will say you want to go to their forums to figure out if you're doing any Ultra HD stuff, because that is a bit more complex, but they have an entire Ultra HD disc section with an FAQ that explains everything you need to know. So all the information is there, whatever discs you want to back up, and that's all you need these days. It's very simple.
Yeah. And go along with your pirating ways.
Well, I use it. I want my Plex server.
I know.
And having it is okay. Who needs to know how it got there? Who's to say?
We have a non-extradition treaty with Canada, so you'll be fine.
No, we don't.
Oh. Well.
That's that whole Huawei thing. We're holding on to somebody for the States so they can extradite them.
Wait. I was thinking about a different place. All right, Karl. Karl was amused by an article posted on Audiophile Review. There's usually very many amusing articles on there, none of them intentionally so, titled "Good Sound is 1% Inspiration, 99% Moving Furniture."
That's the title of the article.
That seems like something that I might say. I feel like maybe I can get behind this article. Let's go on.
Yes.
Despite the website's articles going on about how different amplifiers sound from one another and saying they were dragged kicking and screaming into trying subwoofers in a 2-channel system and having the entire subsection on the site labeled tubes.
Tubes.
So it's a section about the internet. This article actually talks about how the room itself is often the biggest limiting factor in your sound quality, how you can often improve your sound dramatically for free just by positioning things, including furniture and rugs, optimally, and even mentions putting GiK acoustic panels at reflection points after demonstrating you have to yourself you have slap echo issues by doing the clap test. Welcome to the 1970s. Finally, it suggested that if you can't or aren't allowed to make any improvements to the room itself, the best course of action might be to give up and just switch to headphones for critical listening. So could it be that audiophiles are coming around to some of the same conclusions and advice that we've been saying on AVRant for years now? It's obviously meant to be hyperbole in the headlines to grab attention, but do we agree that good sound is 99% moving furniture? No.
Well, I wouldn't put that number on it.
No, it's not 99% moving furniture.
That is definitely a hyperbolic headline to grab attention. But the overall...
Well, not only that, on that website in particular, it's meant to bring out the forum post. Like that is absolutely meant to troll their reader base. That article is, and it's while much of what it says having to give up and just get headphones because you can't move furniture is ridiculous. But that is not something that I mean, that is something I've said.
Well, no, that's just the thing. I mean, you've sometimes said, hey, the best solution here is headphones because that's going to work, and you can have really great sound at a considerably lower price that is private to you and can be fantastic for critical listening. So
especially when people come to you and they're like, oh, I want to have a Atmos surround sound system, but I can't play anything over 65 dB.
Yeah.
And I can't have a subwoofer because it's going to bother my neighbors. All right, well, headphones. No, I mean, I would not put a number on it at all, but I mean...
Yeah, I don't think you can say it's 99% moving furniture because you got to have some at least halfway decent speakers, but I would certainly go as far as to say I will take a decent set of speakers in a good room that is set up optimally over excellent speakers that are in a terrible room.
In a glass box.
Or set up horribly, right? Yeah. So, the setup and the room are hugely important. I usually say the room is half of your system. That's usually the number I give to it.
That'd be closer to it. I might say it's a little bit more than half.
Yeah.
Depends on the room.
But I wouldn't go as far as 99%.
So there was an article I read, and I did not send it to you, Rob, but I thought about it. Essentially, like the 7 things to make for great audio or something like that I came across. And this is the dirty secret of all of these websites and magazines. Talking about speakers, talking about amplifiers, talking about receivers, talking about gear, that is sexy. That sells, that gets people clicking on articles, that sells advertising space, that does all of those things. Okay? Talking about room treatments, room treatments you buy once and you are done. No one buys room treatments and goes, maybe I'll have ones that are a little bit thinner. No one does that. Once you got them, you're done. So they are not something that sells, and they don't want to talk about it. I mean, essentially, this entire article was like 3 or 4 pages long, and when they talked about room treatments, and then again, this article did mention GiK by name.
Yes, they did.
It was a single. This is a different article I'm talking about. This article had a paragraph about room treatments. They had oodles of paragraphs about other things, but a small, tiny, maybe 3-sentence paragraph about room treatments. And they everything they said was kind of true, but the weight that you could see that the importance they gave to room treatments was so slight. And it really is a to me, unequivocally about money. They just don't want to spend the space to talk about
advertising dollars, man.
They just don't want to do it. So,
no, but the overall theme of this, the idea of finally an audiophile saying, let's pay some attention to the room and how things are set up within that room, and maybe even go as far as putting some acoustic treatments on the walls. I'm like, yeah, all for it, man. Whatever steps we can take to get towards this. Yeah, that's good.
I don't think that's what this article is designed to do. I think this article is just designed to get their reader base, rile things up with their reader base, and that's pretty much it. There's going to be, I'm gonna click on it, but I would love to see. I would love to see the comment section after this thing. Has got to be a nightmare. It's gonna be Troll City, but maybe it's not. Maybe they're like, oh my god, I moved my furniture and it made a difference. I can't believe it. What am I gonna do with this? All these tubes? I don't know. Sell them on eBay. 76 shares it's got on this thing. Is there a?
You're actually looking at
only
it right
one comment.
Huh. There you go. Not as clickbaity as you thought.
Yeah. There's got to be someplace. Jim on Twitter. Jim has a 2016 Vizio M Series TV and a 5.1 Vizio soundbar. His Vizio soundbar has an HDMI input and HDMI ARC, or audio return channel, but it won't pass through HDR signals because it's too old. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, his 2016 Vizio M Series TV can do HDR, but it only has one HDR capable HDMI input, and that one HDR input is also the only one with an ARC port.
Yeah.
So in order to see HDR from his Xbox One S, he had to plug his Xbox directly into his TV. That meant he could no longer use audio return channel, so he used an optical connection instead. His TV does pass its 5.1 Dolby Digital and DTS signals through its optical audio output, and his soundbar only decoded Dolby Digital and DTS anyway, so that seemed to work fine. But now he wants to add an Apple TV 4K. Naturally, he wants to use HDR from that device as well, but he only has one HDR input and that accepts HDR. There's a lot of H's in this.
Sorry, there are.
If you guys,
I'm sorry. Those are the only initialisms that exist.
I know. He thought of getting a receiver, but that seems like overkill since he is still just going to be using his soundbar. He also thought of getting an HDMI switch, but as far as spousal acceptance factors go, things need to be kept as simple as possible and as clean looking as possible. He does have a Harmony One remote, but that's strictly IR, so anything he controls has to remain visible. What's the solution here? I don't know. I mean, to me, the real solution is actually getting the receiver. I'm really looking at this going. I mean, I know it's
not. But how? I mean, well, let's say he gets a receiver. I mean, that solves you plug all your sources into the HDMI inputs of your receiver. That can pass through the HDR video out to your television. But how does the audio actually get to his soundbar?
What do you mean? I mean, it gets there by HDMI, right?
But what I mean, so you have to get an AV receiver that has two HDMI outputs.
Most of them do these days, or I mean, like Zone 2, right?
But yeah, then you're actually going to do Zone 2. You're going to be sending.
Zone 2 would be it would be 2-channel, right? So you can't.
No, it doesn't have to be
you can do
2-channel.
Yeah,
but you're actually going to use like a Zone 2 HDMI out just to feed a soundbar. That's.
Or optical. I mean, you can optical.
But a lot of AV receivers no longer have optical outputs. That's kind of a rare feature these days. So I'm thinking a receiver is actually way more complicated than you might be imagining.
I don't know. So what are you saying?
Well, I'm saying get an HDMI switch because you can get 5-in 1-out Sewell SwitchDeck for $40 that has full 18 gigabits per second bandwidth on all of those HDMI ports and will pass through HDR no problem. So on the video side, we're not worrying one iota. And I'm saying you plug your sources into the Sewell SwitchDeck, which will automatically switch to whatever source powers on. And if you have something like a cable box that is always on, you put that on HDMI in 5. And that way, any source that is on HDMI 1 through 4 will take precedence when it turns on.
As long as the Xbox because he's using Xbox and the Apple 4K, as long as one of them is not.
Well, the Xbox you can certainly power off. So the Apple TV 4K could remain on if it needs to, although it has a standby mode too. But yeah, so you plug those in, then I would plug that directly into your television, into its one HDMI input, and then continue using the optical audio output from your TV into your soundbar. Now that Sewell SwitchDeck does come with an infrared remote, which your Harmony will have no problem. I mean, it's in the database already, but it could also learn the commands directly. So if you ever need to manually select one of the HDMI inputs on that SwitchDeck, you can do it with your remote. You would need to keep it visible, but it's small. I mean, it's just big enough to have its 5 inputs and 1 output and power. So I don't think it's ugly.
How much does that thing cost?
$40.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
so
it's $35. They have a 3-in 1-out, which is $35. But for $5 more, why not have 5 inputs? I say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, you said that the receiver was more complicated, but it's not. It's exactly the same complicated because you take.
Oh, so doing the same thing.
The TV. Yeah,
but
the receiver is exactly the same.
Okay, but you're just using it as a switch. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be using it as a switch. Yeah. I mean,
but that would be more than $40.
That's what I'm saying. That's the selling point. Yeah. Your selling point is that it's only $40. My selling point is that someday you might want more speakers.
Connect other speakers to it.
Yeah,
sure.
And then
there you go.
There you go. Jonathan's in the process of redesigning his media room, and all the wires are going to be installed within the walls for a clean look. Should he consider redundancy, as in literally running 2 of each type of wire or cable to each location just in case one cable ever fails? Is that overkill? Well, it's for speakers. I mean, let's put it this way: there's always the chance you're going to put a nail through something, and then you're going to be hosed. Rob's going to say conduit everywhere.
Yes, I am going to say conduit.
Which is what he's going to say, which means that you can always pull more wires through if you need to. Yeah. You lube them up or whatever.
Including like, hey, right now we have HDMI cables that pass 18 gigabits per second. In the future, we're going to have ones that pass 48 gigs per second. Running 2 18 gig right now is not going to equal a 48 gig in the future. So conduit.
Right. So so what I'm going to say is run conduit to your projector for sure. Mm-hmm. I would not worry about speakers. I wouldn't run double for speakers, and I wouldn't run the speaker wire in conduit for that. Yeah. No. I would just run the conduit to the projector or the TV or whatever that is, but not to the speakers. I would only run one pair of speaker wire, and I would just be careful with my nails.
Well, if you like, you can sort of console yourself by running 14.4 speaker wire. Right? 14 gauge with 4 leads instead of 12 gauge with 2 leads or whatever, because you just twist together 2 leads and the other 2 leads, so you end up with a pair at the end, which effectively gives you an 11 gauge speaker wire. Right. And then you're like, hey, if I ever do want to break this out and add a second pair of surround speakers or something like that, well, you've already got the leads available to you, and you just use a butt splice to extend them wherever you need to extend them. So you could console yourself that way. Go with 14.4 speaker wire instead.
Tap. First, an update. The framing of the basement in Tap's new house has been completed. This is the large 18 by 31 foot room where the front section is going to be his theater and the back section is going to be a bar and lounge area. He wound up going with large 4 foot wide soffits on either side to keep a symmetrical look and completely hide any ducting, piping, and wires. The screen and seating will be both 10 feet wide, the same as the distance between the 2 soffits, keeping the look exactly the way Tap wants it. This false wall is going to be 3.5 feet in front of the physical front wall. That's farther away from the physical front wall than initially planned, but it actually works out well since his right surround speaker is going to be on a support column that is about 18 feet from the physical front wall, so now it's only a relatively short distance behind his seats, which will be 12 feet from the front wall, so it's going to be 6 feet behind him.
No, because he's 12 feet plus 3.5 feet. So he's 15, he's 15.5 feet in his seat, so 18 feet back to that column. So, yeah, that's pretty close.
Right, and we've got some pictures, and it's all in framing. And
that's some nice, clean-looking framing, I got to say. So
somebody's doing their job.
I'm impressed with that job. They've left room in there that you can put insulation inside of any of those bays and that. And, yeah, I think you're good to go. That's looking good. Yeah, nice bit of room in behind the false wall screen there. We're seeing a shot of it there if you're looking at the YouTube video.
Oh, is that what? I don't know what you're looking at.
The bottom one in the show notes.
Okie dokie.
Yep.
Oh, so the theater is coming together. Now, he'd like to finalize some of his whole house audio plans. We had mentioned Yamaha's MusicCast system, which definitely interests him. We've also mentioned the Monoprice Dayton whole house audio systems, and of course, there's Sonos Signature as well, only if you have lots and lots of money. Focusing on the Yamaha MusicCast option for a bit, they offer a 4-zone rack-mounted distribution amp, but let's listen at $2,700. I'm going to sneeze. Yamaha also sells, I see if I say it, it doesn't happen. Yamaha also sells individual MusicCast 2-channel amps listed at $500 each, and they have a MusicCast 2-channel preamp listed at $350 each. So there are multiple ways to come at this. He could pay more to get the rack-mounted option, but would that get him over just the 4 individual? What would they give him over just the 4 individual MusicCast amps? He could get a relatively inexpensive distribution amp and then just connect a separate MusicCast preamp for each room, or he could go with something other than MusicCast altogether. Could we talk through the pros and cons of the various options and help him decide? The 4-zone rack-mounted distribution amp sounds like something that's probably great if you are not wanting to do it yourself.
Oh, it's definitely targeted at custom installers.
Yeah.
And it does include some features that the standalone MusicCast 2-channel amplifier doesn't have.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So the main things are that it's more expandable. So in the MusicCast system, you can use a maximum of, I believe they said 9 of those individual 2-channel standalone amplifiers that go for $500 a piece. I believe they said you can use a maximum of 9 of those in your MusicCast system. Whereas if you go with the rack-mounted one, which is a 4-zone system all unto itself, you can expand that to up to 32 zones by adding additional units.
Didn't he only want like 4 zones though?
I believe he wanted 5.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was looking at 5. As far as just, in-ceiling speakers being music zones. Right. So he was like, yeah, this one's only 4. It's a bit more expensive. And I'm like, I don't think you need to expand to 32. But the other thing that the rack-mounted version is meant for, and the reason it's more expensive, is because it's already programmed to work with systems like Control 4 and Crestron and AMX. So it's really targeted at the custom installers. That's what it's there for. And I don't know what TAP has decided on that front, because he was questioning before if he's going to go for a professionally installed system like Control 4 or just try to basically do each room by itself. Now, what the standalone amplifier or the preamplifier version offers is it's really meant to just live in each room, because you can connect to those standalone units wirelessly with something like AirPlay, or essentially just cast your music to it without even going into the MusicCast app to control it. So you can do all of the streaming services that are supported within MusicCast, no matter which way you go. But if you want to be able to just walk into a room and say, hey, I'm already playing something on my iPhone, I just want to AirPlay this to the built-in audio system, you can do that with the little standalone amplifiers. You can't do that with the rack-mounted ones. So that's sort of where the features go there. Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't point TAP in this case to Monoprices or Dayton's. They're the same thing. They're standalone 6-zone matrix distribution system, because I don't think he wants, I wouldn't recommend to him to be messing with their app, like that's the only way he's going to control all that. Because one of the lovely things about MusicCast is we know TAP is going to have several theater setups. Like he's gonna have like a living room setup and a master bedroom setup and this dedicated theater down in the basement. And if all of those are Yamaha receivers, those can all be part of the MusicCast system. That's why I like it so much. So you wouldn't get that if you went with Monoprices or Dayton's system. So I'm more in favor of sticking with MusicCast. Then the question becomes, does he put one of these little wireless standalone amplifiers in each room, which I actually think makes a whole lot of sense? Or does he say, I could buy a pretty inexpensive, like just dumb amplifier, right? Like one of those distribution amps that just has 12 amplifier channels built into it. It's not a matrix. It's not its own source or anything. And then just connect the MusicCast preamplifiers. So everything's still in one location, but you just have several of these MusicCast preamplifiers plugged into a distribution app. And now you can send whatever you want to whatever zone that way. The total price ends up being a bit lower.
Yeah. I mean, I think either way that works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of having it in the room, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only ever going to use MusicCast, then you don't need that. It's only if you want the convenience of, I don't want to open the MusicCast app, I'm already playing something on my phone, and I just want to throw it to the amplifier in this room. Yeah. Then you would put one in each room, right?
Yeah, to me, I would go with the preamps. That was when I read all this stuff. That was the thing I was thinking. I would go with the preamps. I feel like that's going to give them a cleaner overall experience
and have everything centralized.
Yeah,
and it does actually, other than not doing MusicCast at all and going with the Monoprice system instead, it ends up being the lowest price.
The Monoprice stuff is great for people who are just looking for home audio, and they are. Like when somebody comes to us and they're like, "Oh, I want to be able to use a Chromecast audio in all these different rooms."
Yeah.
Well, something like that works.
Yes.
But the thing about the Yamaha though is that you're now going to buy into the Yamaha ecosystem. You're going to be Yamaha in every room.
Yeah.
And that therefore everything will work together. If you're not wanting to do that for whatever reason, well then, just you could still use a Yamaha to make this whole thing happen. But I would go whole hog on it.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with Yamaha receivers, so I'd be perfectly happy with that.
So yeah, we could still very much point you to the Dayton, just the dumb distribution amp. The one that just has 12 amplifier channels built in. You plug in whatever sources. It's not a matrix switch, but that's fine because we're going to want you to have a MusicCast preamplifier for each individual zone. Those are all connected to your network, and that way you can just pull up the MusicCast app and say, I want to play this music in this zone or this group of zones, and it's all just going to happen. Right. So yeah, I like that.
John on Twitter. John got some Ascend Sierra 2 speakers. So far, he loves them. It's his first time hearing ribbon tweeters. He sits about 9 feet from the speakers, and his front wall is about 10 feet wide. The room is not a rectangle, though, and the right wall is at a 45-degree angle, so the back wall is about 18 feet wide. With his narrow front wall, he's wondering about optimal placement. He's heard about how raw ribbon tweeters are pickier than other speakers when it comes to matching the height of the tweeters to the height of your ears. How big of a deal is this? And what can we do to make sure he isn't degrading his performance just by having his speakers at the wrong height? Well, you want your speakers, the tweeters, to be at ear level. Mm-hmm. So most tweeters, and basically it's the size of your stands.
Right.
But without that... most speakers designed in North America are designed with North American couches in mind, and you end up being about the right height. We're not talking like, oh, I think the tweeter is an inch below my ear. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like inches, like 6 or 12 or something like that, depending on the distance from you to the speaker. I have had this problem before with whatever the name of that speaker was. It wasn't KRK, KiK. I don't remember. Some Australian brand sent some speakers over, and I hated them. And mostly because the tweeters were like at my knees.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, the tweeters were just so low, so I sat on the ground. I'm like, these don't sound so bad, but I don't want to have to sit on the ground. But Australian fashion is very much in line with like, contemporary, sort of,
like
Scandinavian size, really low couches, really clean lines and looks. I mean, there are areas that are more traditional, but generally speaking, like all the new construction out there, it's all boxes. Like all the houses just look like different shape, size,
90-degree
colors
angles
and stuff
everywhere.
like that. Yeah, personally, that's my style as well. So I loved it, but there was plenty of people who didn't. So I think that's why that speaker was designed in that way. And I mean. Technically, I guess I could have put it on a stand, but it was a floor standing speaker, so it kind of seems silly to get a little stand for it. So what you want to do is figure out what your height is when you're at your, well, you got the speakers already, so it doesn't make any difference, but you look at the speakers. If the stand is too high, then or too low, then get a different stand. Other than that, you should be fine.
Yeah, the coming at this from the, if you just want to figure out what the speaker is doing and where you should be sitting relative to that speaker, the trick I like to use is you just go into your receiver's manual speaker setup where you set the trim levels, the levels for each speaker, which will play pink noise, out of one speaker at a time. And I like to have that pink noise playing out of one speaker and get myself really close to that speaker, about 1 foot away, and start with myself like right on axis, right in front of that speaker, and listen to that pink noise and hear what tone and timbre that it has, and then slowly move myself up and down to the sides and make note of how far can I get up or down, or how far can I get to the left or the right before I notice an audible change in the tone of that pink noise. And sometimes it's quite dramatic. You can hear it sometimes quite abruptly. Sometimes it's kind of a gradual change as you move up or down or to the left or the right. But you can tell when the tone of that pink noise has changed, and that can give you an idea. I call it like a cone of dispersion coming out of the speaker. And in the case of the Sierra 2s with that raw ribbon tweeter, it is going to be like a squished cone. You are not going to be able to move that much up or down before you notice the change in tone of that pink noise, but you're going to be able to move quite far to the sides before they have wide horizontal dispersion, but pretty narrow vertical dispersion. But ultimately, you figure out sort of the shape of that cone, and then you just want to be sitting within that cone. And this is one of the reasons why, if you're in a not that large theater, so you're not that far away from your front speakers, but you have, fairly wide seating, sometimes I like to experiment with pretty dramatic toe in so that, the left speaker if it were facing straight forward, the far right seat would be outside of that cone of dispersion. That's, quite often the case. Whereas if you aggressively toe it in, now you can maybe get all the seats within that dispersion cone. Even though the speaker might look a little strange aiming in that much, it's about being within that cone. Yeah. That's my approach.
I was on audiophilereview.com reading a comparison of SACD versus MQA in physical format, and the
hokum.
Whenever a review of something like that ends with a statement like, it'd be fairly system dependent whether or not you can hear. It's like just shoehorning in an app's like, well, if you can't hear it, then your system sucks.
Yes. Oh, yes. They love that.
So it says, I'm back. I'm sorry. And John, I just want to let you know, I am paying attention to your questions. I'm just not paying attention to Rob's answers.
That's right.
His sensor speaker, also a Sierra 2, has to be lower than ear height since it would be below his TV. Would it be okay to tilt the center up to aim it at ear level? Absolutely okay. But remember, when you turned it, the tweeter, don't they turn that tweeter so, or do they they have the tweeter so that the dispersion is more wide, more up and down than it is left to right?
No, when you get the center version of the Sierra 2,
do they turn the tweeter 90 degrees?
They turn the cabinet 90 degrees, but then they also turn the tweeter 90 degrees. So the ribbon is still up and down, even though the cabinet is now horizontal.
But in general, aiming center channels is a perfectly fine thing to do and should be done if if they're not at optimal height, which almost none of them are.
That's right.
So don't feel like you're
unless you have an acoustically transparent projection screen and you've put the center speaker also at ear height, you probably have it above or below your TV.
So what about proximity to the walls? How close can they be to the front wall, which is behind the speakers, and how close can they be to the side walls? Generally speaking, I think my rule of thumb is about 18 inches is a very good amount of space to have around a speaker.
Ideally, yes.
I mean, if you have less, you have less. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at my speakers right now and wondering if I definitely have 18 inches behind, and I look like I have very close to 18 inches to the side of my right speaker. My left speaker is perfectly fine because there's an opening there to a closet, so it's not huge. But 18 inches all the way around is fine. I mean, you can be closer. Many speaker manufacturers, especially if the speaker is not rear ported, will tell you can be quite a bit closer than that. If it is ported to the sides or backs, they may say, leave at least this amount around that port, unobstructed around that port.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Ascend has something to say on this.
Oh, yeah. Dave himself has chimed in on the forum on this topic, and he said, even though these are rear-ported speakers, the CR2s are, he's like, 3 inches of clearance is sufficient. That you're not going to have like a problem. You will have some boundary gain reinforcement.
Sure.
The bass will be a little bit louder as a result of being that close to the boundary. But in terms of the speaker being able to function properly and all that, he's like, 3 inches is enough. So that's pretty darn close. And in fact, they even go a step further, which is they sell optionally, they call them Q plugs, but it's port plugs. They optionally sell port plugs for the CR2s. And he's like, once you have those, it's essentially a sealed cabinet and put them as close to the wall as you please at that point. They can only get so close physically because the binding posts physically stick out the back. So that's as close as it can get with the port plugs installed. But that's fine. He's like, 8 inches or more is preferable. And then, we're all in agreement of 18 inches is about ideal, if that or more is about ideal. At which point you have very little boundary reinforcement going on.
All right, just want to let everybody know it's 11:30 p.m. my time. So if I start getting punchy, it's because
we only
of
have a few more questions though, so
I am very close to the I don't give a you know what, and we're going to end this podcast because I am quite tired. Francis on Facebook. Francis installed a 7.2.4 Atmos speaker system with front and rear height speakers. He was a bit disappointed in thinking Atmos was overhyped. The front and rear height speakers didn't seem to be doing much or adding much to the experience, but he was mostly using his Xbox One S as his source. And tried playing the Blu-ray version of A Quiet Place on standalone Sony Blu-ray player, and it suddenly sounded like a different system. So was his Xbox One S to blame the whole time? Does it output bad sound quality? Is it just a movie-by-movie difference? Welcome to the podcast, sir.
I'm
glad that you're a new listener, and welcome to
That's not actually true, but no.
Yeah, I've been complaining about this problem for a long time, but not only, I think there's one of two things. Well, there's probably two things going on here, but the first thing is the Xbox in general sucks for audio. in everything that's not a game or a disc. It should do discs just fine.
However, you would have had to have gone into the settings and made sure that you checked in the disc section, not in the audio section, because there's a separate menu item just for physical discs, and there you would have had to make sure that you check let my audio receiver decode audio. That's those
something
along
those lines.
Very, very close to that.
I don't think that you made that change.
That's
because
entirely possible.
If you needed a different Blu-ray player to make this thing sound good, then the Xbox One should do A Quiet Place just fine.
Yeah, that should be entirely possible because it should be able to just take the audio that's on the disc and spit out the bit stream without having touched it at all. That the Xbox One S can do as long as you've gone into that disc menu and said, let my audio receiver handle decoding.
Yeah. Now you have to do the same thing in the normal sound menu to turn Atmos on. So you probably did that. At which point your AV receiver, up until quite recently,
always said Atmos no matter what.
Right.
And then you were wondering, how come I'm not hearing anything out of my front and rear height speakers?
Or side surrounds.
And you would have been correct. You would have been absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically what it was doing is it takes whatever sound it gets, 2-channel, 1-channel, 4-channel, doesn't matter, puts it into an Atmos container and then sends it off to the receiver. Well, your receiver says, okay, I'm getting Atmos.
I got a flag telling me this is Atmos audio.
All the speakers are being engaged as they should be. So just because only the front, left, and right speakers are the only ones they're playing, that's the way it should be, and therefore I can't take those sounds in those 2 speakers and matrix them out to the rest because the rest are being used. They're just playing nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that is supposed to be changing, as we covered in the news at the top of this podcast. It's only in the alpha ring right now, so you can't get it at this moment, but Dolby Surround Upmixing within the Xbox console itself is on its way.
And I will believe it when I see it or hear it, because I believe that they are going to screw it up between alpha and now.
Dolby themselves did it, so I trust them more.
I trust them to do their part right. I don't trust Microsoft to implement it correctly. So Francis says his kid pushed the dust cap in on one of his PB1000 subs. It used to be an Audi, but now it's any. Is it ruined? Will it affect the sound? Any way to pop it back out? Okay, so I sort of kind of started to answer his question on Facebook.
On Facebook, yeah.
My question, because it looks like it's damaged. It
looks like it's creased.
Yeah, there's something going on there. So if it's not ripped,
right,
I think it should be fine. Most speaker designers I've talked to, when I ask them about this, are like, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, the dust cap, because it's just the dust cap. You haven't actually done anything to the woofer itself.
Yeah.
That dust cap is just there because it is like a cone shape, the woofer itself, and it has like a little hole in the middle because you just kind of bent a piece of metal, in the case of SVS's woofers, into a cone shape, and then to cover that little hole in the middle, they put a dust cap over it. So it's just the dust cap, which, yeah, as long as it doesn't have like an actual hole in it or where it's connected to the woofer, you know, the perimeter of the dust cap hasn't like torn away or something like that, should be fine.
So if you take some tape and wrap it around your hand so the sticky part is on the outside, you can try to pull it back out that way. I've tried, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, I've tried sucking it out. You know, you just kind of give it a pucker up and give it a little kiss.
Well, especially when it's a dust cap on like a much smaller mid-range driver or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So, you know, these things happen. It's not the end of the world. As long as it's not ripped, it shouldn't make sonically a difference that you'll at all, but definitely not something you should hear.
That's right. But if it is damaged, it can be fixed. It's just a dust cap. So that can be fixed.
Phil, a Philharmonic, I think. Phil is excited. He says he's finally gotten a room almost all to himself to turn into a dedicated home theater. Then it's not almost all. 17 feet 2 inches long by 15 feet 6 inches wide, but it's completely open on the left side. There's a door at the back that leads to a closed-off section where he plans to keep his AV rack. He's planning to have his seats 11.5 feet from the front wall. It's 17 by 15.5. So it's the 17 wide?
17
No,
long.
15 wide.
15 and a half wide.
And he's going to sit 11 feet back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's got, 6 feet behind him or so.
He's currently showing 2 subs at the front of the room, so we already got an issue there.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Do we have any suggestions for a blackout curtain to visually close off that open left wall? The room has been framed and soundproofing insulation has been installed in the walls and in the ceiling. Is there an acoustic curtain that you can install on that left opening to help close off the area sound-wise as well? I mean, you could put some sort of mass-loaded curtain there, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. So
it's not going to do anything to the bass. There's no curtain that's going to do anything to the bass. You could go with a vinyl curtain, perhaps even, like you get a vinyl curtain and then you also have a nicer fabric layer over it.
Yeah, I would definitely do that.
But that will block definitely some of it'll block some of the high frequencies for sure if it's a vinyl curtain.
Dude, you got that thing playing reference volume, you're going to be on the other side of that curtain, you ain't going to be able to talking to nobody.
Yeah. Curtains aren't the way to block sound, but you can... it's curtain versus no curtain. It can be quieter with the curtain in there if it's a vinyl curtain.
I'm going to put it this way.
It's not going to do the bass anything.
I think you can be measurably quieter at some frequencies. Sure. I think subjectively you're going to be like, this is not really making that much of a difference. So, but whatever. Yes, you can get some blackout curtains. And I mean, they will visually make a big difference, but sonically I think the difference is going to be pretty marginal. So don't overspend is what I'm going to say.
Is there a specific place we'd point him, or we just say head on down to a fabric store or a curtain shop and they will have blackout material?
They will. I mean, that's kind of what I would do. Yeah. I mean, are you handy? Can you sew? Because I can't. But if you can, or if your significant other or one of your children or a friend or something like that can, and they're willing to do this for you. I mean, the problem is like you're gonna be having these so that you can open them and close them on the regular, or are they always going to be hung there?
Right.
In which case, build a wall. But I'm sorry, I said build a wall for the guy who's going to complain I whispered that. But I don't like that. I said build a wall. I feel dirty now for some reason. I'm not sure why. But definitely, if they're gonna have to move and stuff, that's going to be an extra consideration because those heavy curtains are not going to, most solutions for hanging curtains don't consider that they might weigh 60 pounds.
But
I mean, go across a 17-foot room.
There do exist very heavy drapes sometimes, so it's not as though there aren't curtain rod systems designed for heavy drapery.
Yeah, but they're usually mounted to the wall, like at multiple points. They're not. This thing's going to be going across the middle of a room.
He does have though a overhang. It's like a 1 foot overhang coming down from the ceiling. He described over that opening on the left. So there's some kind of structure that he can put his curtain rod into above that opening.
Okay.
So that should be doable. But yeah, we're saying heavier vinyl, that's the only way you're going to block any sound at all. It's not going to touch your bass. Do not expect it to.
So we'd like to install some acoustic panels, but they would need to be visually attractive. So he was thinking printed panel. So I like to be able to get them in custom sizes. He was thinking since he'd have the large curtain on the left, he'd put the panels on the right side wall, and the floor would be carpeted. In recommendation to where to buy panels. I mean, GiK does this stuff now.
They have their acoustic art panels, which are actually, they're not even printed. They're dyed. So it's really high quality. Really, really high quality.
I would not rely on that curtain to necessarily be the sole source of absorption on your left wall. I mean, the fact is that if you make them heavy enough so that they can deaden some of the sound, the rest of the sound's still going through. So I would still put acoustic panels on the other side of the curtain.
Really?
I mean, the
sound is either you have plush curtaining that is absorbing some high frequency and then the bass is escaping, in which case having acoustic panels on the right side wall to equalize that a little bit works, or the curtain is doing next to nothing, at which point it's like having an opening, so having the right side wall absorptive still makes sense to me.
Oh, I'm not saying that that's not true. I mean, I think you have the right side wall absorptive, but put absorptive panels on the left side wall, the walls on the left as well. Like any art that's in here should be absorptive.
Yes. Oh yeah. I agree with that, and I would have some stuff on your back wall too.
Oh, for sure.
I would definitely want to have some stuff on your back wall. But yeah, if the acoustic art panels from GiK are a little too pricey for you, because they're not ridiculous, but they're not super cheap either. There is a less expensive alternative from Acoustimac. They have acoustic art panels that are less expensive than GiK's. Those are printed as opposed to dyed, but you get it at a nicer price. So there you go. A couple of good options.
So he has a budget of around $4,000 for the audio system. He was planning on getting a Denon X4500H receiver and using SVS Prime series speakers all around, plus 2 subwoofers. Should he get dual SB1000s or dual PB1000? His plan was to put them both on the front wall. Would 2 subs be overkill? Again, welcome to the podcast. It's nice to have new listeners. Thank you very much. But these subs aren't big enough, I don't think. PB1000.
That left side's open. How much space is on the other side of that curtain? Because that's what your subs are dealing with.
I like PC 2000s.
PC 2000s would be real good.
I just kicked my stupid camera again.
Well, let's say the price only allows for $1,000 maximum. You would definitely be going with the PBs, not the SBs. Not the SBs in here, because you do not have an enclosed 17 by 15.5 foot room.
Right.
You have whatever space is on the other side of that opening where you're going to have the curtain. That is your room as well as far as the subwoofers are concerned. So, at the very least would be PB1000s. We'd love to see some PC 2000s, perhaps even more, depending on what's on the other side of that curtain. But,
Now, and as far as placement goes, both up front is a awful idea, but
it's still better than one sub all by itself.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Never overkill. So getting the second sub only gains you about 3 decibels. Now, I say only gains you 3 decibels because then people go, oh, that's not that much. But remember, 3 decibels is literally twice as much power, so it's also not nothing. But that's not the reason you get 2 subs. The reason you get 2 subs is so you have this fairly wide couch that you're showing in your image, and do you want, when you sit on the left side of that couch, for the bass to sound totally different from when you sit in the middle of the couch? You shouldn't. It should be uniform, and the only way to get uniform is to have 2 subs. That's what 2 subs are about.
Yeah. So the way you would place these subs is not both on your front wall, even though visually it's appealing. What you would do, I believe, because I gotta believe that what's on the other side of this curtain is not as big, or at least about the same size of what's on this side.
If it's
curtain.
About the same size,
I would measure that front wall and put the sub in the front wall and put the sub midpoint, wherever that is, in the room. Hopefully, it's on the side of the curtain that is in the home theater, and then I would put the second sub on the back wall in the midpoint of that wall, and hopefully that's inside the curtain.
Okay, so we're assuming, let's say there's another 15.5 foot wide room to the left of this room.
Yeah.
So you're essentially saying put them both on what is the left side of this theater.
Right. You would both be on the left side of the theater, because remember, the bass don't care where you sit.
The bass has no idea what you have designated as the theater area.
Yeah.
The bass
There's
is
no
just
little
like,
cat gate you can put around a little electronic fence for the sound.
What is the total cubic footage I'm dealing with here? That's what the subwoofer is dealing with. It has no idea that there's a curtain. It has no idea that you don't want the bass to escape out of the opening. It's going to escape out of the opening. So we got to deal with the whole space. So if you've got something like a similar sized room to the left of this theater room,
hopefully a little bit smaller, like just a little bit smaller, so that it'll be inside the curtain.
Where we want to have 2 subs is across the room from each other, keeping in mind the room in this case includes everything to the left of that curtain.
Yeah. That's kind of the place that makes sense to me, because the other option is to put them in opposing corners, which puts one inside the theater area and one outside the theater area, or
one on the middle of the right wall of the theater, and then the middle of the left wall of whatever is on the other side of the curtain. All the way over there, which would be weird. Let's be real here. So even though within the theater area, it's probably going to look kind of weird to have a sub in what is essentially the front left corner of your theater and the rear left corner of your theater, but acoustically, that is where they are most likely to work best in here.
Yeah. So he's budgeted for a 7.2 speaker system, but he would rather go with what he called a 9.2 setup if he can fit the budget. Would it be worth going with only one subwoofer in order to afford the additional pair of prime satellite speakers? No. Plus, I don't know what you mean by 9.2. Do you mean...
I know.
He must mean Atmos.
Well,
right?
Yeah, because looking at the diagram, he's sketched in these satellite speakers. So he's put 2 satellite speakers on the back wall very wide apart. So I'm assuming he's actually calling those his surrounds, because those are way too wide apart to be surround backs. And then he's got a pair of satellite speakers directly to the left and the right of his seating, but way up high. If we look at the second part of his diagram,
I see it.
They're way up high and aiming down, which like prime elevation speakers could work perfectly in that application. And then he's got another pair of satellites in this diagram well ahead of his seats, also on the sides, also way up high. So I'm thinking he's like considering those as like top fronts, and well, they're the ones on the side to the sides of the seats would be more like top middles. So you'd have to call the ones in front of that front heights. But, I mean, the placement's there as calling them front heights and top middles. That's actually fine if this is going to be an Atmos setup. But this would be a 5.2.4 Atmos setup if you did this. Or if you just can't afford it if you're going to have 2 subs, and you must have 2 subs as far as we're concerned, then this would end up being a 5.2.2 system.
Right, so I think all of his speakers are up high, including those back ones. I don't think...
Possibly, although there's no physical reason why the ones on the back wall have to be up high.
There's no... I mean, yeah, I guess there's physical reason why the ones on the left wall have to be high.
Yes, the ones on the left wall have to be high because there's a 1-foot area that he can use above the opening. Otherwise, they'd have to go on a stand.
Yeah, and so what I would do is I would designate the ones to your left and right of your couch as surrounds.
Okay,
I would
even though they're way up high.
Yeah, even though they're way up high.
Okay.
I would move your back ones in a little bit so they're in line with your main speakers.
Yes, closer together. The ones that are on their back. So move the one that is what is basically in the rear left corner to the other side of that door.
Yes.
And then move the one that's
or
essentially
above the door. I mean, I think it's up. But maybe it's not.
For surround backs, it'd be fine to have it on the other side of the door, closer to the middle of the wall, and then move what's basically in the rear right corner right now, an equal distance in. So they're closer together on the back wall, calling them surround backs, and then the one pair of surround speakers directly to the sides of your seats, up high, and calling them surrounds. And you have a 7.2 system.
Right, and then that's still Atmos, by the way.
It is still Atmos.
Counts as Atmos.
It is still an
Then
Atmos
the ones that you have in front of your couch to the sides, I would take those and get rid of them because I don't think
you go. Because if the only way you can afford 2 subs is to not have them, that's what you do.
Well, I don't. Somebody's going to say, well, you could put those as front heights. No, I mean, yes, you can.
You can.
No, I mean, I wouldn't. I wouldn't spend the money if I had speakers and I had nothing else to do with them, and I would use them.
Sure,
but it's literally the only reason I would do it. It doesn't make to me much of an audible difference. I would go with 7.2.2. No, 7.2.
7.2. Full stop.
Period. No.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Done.
Yeah. I got to scroll back down. Okay. The left wall is open, but it has a 1-foot header at the top, which is what Rob keeps telling me, but I didn't know that until just now. So he was planning to mount prime satellite speakers up high and angled down on that header, and then match that high angled down position on the right wall. What's the best way to set up his? We already talked about that.
We did. It's a 7-speaker setup, 7.2. The ones in that high up position to the sides will just be your surround speakers.
Yeah, and if the surround backs are lower, that's just perfectly fine too.
Oh yes.
Okay. The budget for his display is separate from the audio budget for his display. Okay. He would ideally love to get a 77-inch OLED. Any advice on finding a lower price, or any advice about his display choice in general? You know, this is and we haven't run into this in a while, but a lot of times you end up with people really value video over audio.
Sure.
And I've got no problems with that. I think that the video experience is something that's got much more wow factor right up front, but the audio is something that sticks with you. Okay. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. So, you know, buying a super high-end display and then having a sound bar is just lame. It's
but he's
just
not
so
doing that.
terrible.
He's getting darn good speakers.
He is.
We like those SVS Prime speakers a lot. He's getting a great AV receiver, so he's not skimping on the audio system.
So I just want to, just throwing that out there. It's that, sort of a thing that we run into every once in a while. But I would definitely, he's sitting how far away?
11 to 11 and a half feet. Even a 77-inch screen.
It's not really big enough, dude.
Big enough. We want you to get, I would be pointing you to a 120-inch projection screen.
It sounds like he's going to have full light control in here.
Yeah, he's putting up a blackout curtain.
I mean, he's got a big blackout curtain, so surely he can take, if there's any other windows that we don't know about, he can cover those up.
And
I would go with a projection setup as well.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not going to say you have to go acoustically transparent in here because it's not a huge room, and I'm not going to take up 2 to 3 feet with a false wall in here. It's not necessary. You can have your center speaker below a 120-inch screen. 120 inches to me is right about the perfect size where you can reasonably still have a center speaker below it without the center speaker essentially being on the floor.
And I hate to say it, but we're going to save you money over an OLED.
Even when I go ahead and recommend to you, because I don't think you're going to have light control to the level that there is literally zero ambient light in this room.
Right.
And I'm not sure what you were going to paint your walls, but probably not matte black. So given that, I would say although these days in JVC's lineup, the entry level is the $3,800 X790. Now, that's $3,800 for a JVC X790. That is still well less expensive than a 77-inch OLED. And since we're saying you don't need an acoustically transparent screen, you can get a silver ticket.
Right.
Which is like 120 inches. What is it, $350 or something like that?
Is it even that expensive? Wow.
It might not even be that expensive. But we're talking a little over $4,000 for a 120-inch system. Like, that's the way to go, man. That's the way to go.
I know you're like, oh, the OLED, the direct view, whatever. Okay, that's fine. Guess what? Yeah. Your TV is going to be on a stand, and your stand is going to be like 4 feet into the room, 3 feet into the room, so that OLED is close enough to you so that you're getting that field of view. And you might as well bring the speakers in too while you're at it. Or better yet, move your entire system, your entire couch forward so you're sitting in front of the midpoint of the wall, so that you're sitting close enough, midpoint of the room. So you're sitting close enough to the speakers, to the TV, so you get that big field of view.
We want you like 7 feet from eyes to screen with a 77-inch screen. That would be ideal for movie time.
Yeah. 7 feet.
7 feet would be great. 8 feet is fine from 77 inches.
I could live with 8 feet.
You could live with it.
11 feet is just too small.
Yeah, but let's say he ignores all that. He's just going to do that. He's no matter what, he's going to get like a 75 or 77-inch flat panel. He's going to sit 11 or 11 and a half feet away from it. Looking at his diagram, it appears as though he's gone to some effort to get his center speaker to be the same height, tweeter-wise, as the towers.
Yeah.
That's too high. I don't want your TV to be that far off the ground if it's going to be a flat panel. I'm not a fan of that idea because you don't want to be looking up at your TV screen. It's just uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So don't do that. Have it so that if it's going to be a flat panel, your eye line is equal to about 1/3 up the screen, which normally ends up being...
And don't be afraid. Yeah, we just talked about this, but don't be afraid to tilt your center speaker up. It's not that big of a deal.
Yes.
I know people are like, all the tweeters got to be the same level, but come on.
In an ideal world with an acoustic transparent screen, sure. Yes, we'll say that too. But
we're not doing that.
No. It's totally fine. And if you go with the 120-inch non-acoustically transparent screen, like we're recommending, your center speaker is going to be below the tweeter level of your towers. That's fine. You angle it up at your face.
That's right. And a lot of centers channels come with like wedges and systems for angle them anyways. All right, we're done. Who's the last person?
We have Michael I, who wrote on Twitter, and that's just fine. Michael I is on the list. We'll get to you next week, Michael.
All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 84 patrons over at patreon.com. And we want to thank Infinite... You didn't talk, so I kept going. We want to thank Infinite Gary for talking us up to Philharmonic.
Very good. Yes, Infinite Gary, thank you for talking us up. Our 84 patrons at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Thank you so much for supporting us with that monthly donation. If you'd like to make a one-time donation, come to avrant.com, our website. Over on the right-hand side, support AVRant takes you to PayPal.
All right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.